Apparently, I'm live. I got those words on the screen says you are live. Greetings, Blathering Boomer here. This is my Tuesday night podcast being done on Wednesday night because I completely blew it last night with my live stream, and I took it down this morning. It was it was incoherent. Thank you to the 8 or 9 people who actually watched it, but I'm embarrassed about it. I'm going to turn things around because there's a reason I have this channel, and the reason I have this channel is not to talk about politics. There's dozens, hundreds of channels that talk politics. And although I'm going to talk politics in the second half of the episode, it is not the focus of this channel. But I am outraged about a couple of things, and I can't sit here and eat my kishkas out over that. So I will talk about that. But first, I want to tell a story about the story and why I'm telling a story. So, in 1973, which was 50 years ago, and honestly, I never thought I'd see the day where I would be telling things that happened 50 years ago. It was the unthinkable distant past, but here we are. In 1973, I was a sophomore at State University in New York at Albany, and I was driving my car from Brooklyn, where my parents lived, and where I technically lived, to the dormitories up in Albany, New York, at the State University. And as you know, if you watched any of my podcasts, I went to prison, and you'll also know that when I was in high school, I was such a straight-laced kid. Nobody would have had it on their bingo card that I was going to go to prison, but I did. Spoiler, there's your spoiler. I'll tell these stories, but there's no suspense. I did go to prison. Anyway, a couple of years before all that happened, I'm driving up the thruway, as I said. I'm on my way to Albany, and I'm right around Spring Valley. I think as my recollection does, it's Whole Booth at the Spring Valley off-ramp where you actually enter the thruway if you're coming up from New York City via the Palisades Parkway through Jersey, etc. Blah, blah, blah. I'm blathering. Sorry. Anyway, there was a guy in a Navy uniform hitchhiking. And my dad had always told me, if you see a serviceman hitchhiking, pick him up, especially if it's a Navy guy, because my dad was a Navy guy. And again, it was 1973, much more innocent times. 50 years ago. I can't believe 1973 was 50 years ago. But it was. So I pick up the hitchhiker, and we're going along, and he's trying to get to Canada. And I said, well, I could take you as far as Albany. It was probably 100 miles worth of his probably 300 or 400 mile, 350 mile journey that he was embarking upon. And we get to talking. You know, he throws his duffel bag in the back. He's sitting in the front. We're chatting away. Anyway, come to find out, he's gone AWOL. And the reason he's going to Canada is because he had done 2 tours in Vietnam. He did not want to do a 3rd tour. I'm not sure if he had already gotten orders to go back to Vietnam. We didn't cover that. All I knew was that he didn't want to go back to Vietnam, and he was heading to Canada, and where he'd collect his thoughts and figure out what to do next. So I said to him, man, that's really risky. If they catch you, they're going to throw you in the brig, and it's going to be years out of your life. And he said to me words that actually changed my life. Little did I know it at the time. He said, if I have to go to prison, I will not regard that as years out of my life. I'll regard that as years of my life. And that stuck with me, and it came up. And it came up in a big way, and in a life-changing way, actually. But it was even at the time, I felt it was a pretty wise and courageous thing of him to say, and kind of not what I was expecting. Prison is just wasted time, lost time, time where you get older and don't progress as a person. It didn't occur to me that somebody can look at it as years of his life and not years out of his life. So flash ahead to March, I'd say around March 13th, 1976. So we're about 3 years later, and there I am in state prison. And they threw me in a cell. First day I was there, and all that was in the cell was a pack of rolling papers, a pack of tobacco, a pack of matches, a toilet, a roll of toilet paper, a bunk with a thin mattress on it, a very, very blood-stained blanket, a pencil, and one sheet of writing paper. And I paced around the cell for a while, and I rolled up what I wanted to pretend to be a joint. It was actually a cigarette, and that's a whole other story that I'm not going to tell right now. Sorry, but I will tell it. I'll get to that. Not in this episode, because none of that's the point. The point is, I sat down in the bunk and just kind of let my mind go, and that conversation with the Navy guy came back to me, and I started thinking, I could turn this around. I'm sitting there absolutely terrified of the prospect of spending the next 1 year to life. That was my sentence, 1 to life. The prospect of spending 1 year to life in prison. And again, nobody had me going to prison checked on their bingo card, especially me. But there I was. And it occurred to me, though, at that moment, I have a story to tell, and I'm locked up, and I have nothing but time on my hands, literally. I could write. I could tell the story about how a 16-year-old kid takes a job in the public library for minimum wage, $1.60 an hour, to support his bowling habit, and how literally 5 years to the day later, on November 3rd, 1976, he commits an indictable felony offense that lands him in prison. Everything that happened between November 3rd, 1970 and November 3rd, 1975. Did I say 76? It was 1975. So it was exactly 5 years to the day. December 4th, 75, I was busted. And here I was in March of 76, sitting in Dannemora, Clinton State Prison, upstate New York near the Canadian border, suddenly realizing that I could spend my time writing. So I grabbed that pencil and I filled that piece of paper with scrawl. And when I filled both sides, it was frustrating because I had no more paper and I had a lot of story to tell, a lot. Well, as it happens, in that sense of the word, I hit the lottery a couple of days later, because Gary Decker, who had ridden with me in the police car, in the sheriff's car, on the way from Albany County Jail to Dannemora State Prison. My number was 76D47. His number was 76D45. He was 2 cells down. We were neighbors, and we shared the experience of riding in the sheriff's car together on the way to prison. It turns out he had a composition notebook that he wasn't using, and he gave it to me. That was like hitting the lottery. I went from having one sheet of paper, literally, to having an entire book. And I filled that book with scroll, and eventually I got a pen, so it was ink scroll and not pencil scroll anymore. But by the time I got out, I had access to a typewriter, which was like riding an elevator instead of climbing the stairs, or driving a Cadillac instead of a jalopy. A typewriter was an amazing thing to acquire. Anyway, I filled that notebook, filled up a couple of other notebooks that I bought at commissary later on, and I had a lot of handwritten and typed stories, both mostly about how I came to be in prison, but some of it just kind of creative writing. I would actually write stories and read them to the other prisoners and get a lot of laughs. It was kind of cool. It was one of the positives about prison. There was some joy in there. But the main thing of it was, I was able to create a facade for myself, because now I wasn't just doing time for a felony that I actually committed, which on the surface is exactly what was happening. But in my head, I was there as a storyteller. I was there to tell the stories of how I got there and to gather information on how I survived being there. And by turning myself from an inmate into a writer, I was able to rationalize, justify the entire experience. Okay, so obviously those writings meant a lot to me. But here's what ends up happening. So we skip ahead 12 years to 1987. I was married to my wife at the time. We had a baby who was very big at the time and has a lot of children of his own. And we're there in the house, me, the wife, and the baby, and she's pregnant, having a second kid, and she's doing some spring cleaning. So my books were taking up space in the dresser, and she wanted to use the dresser for clothes. What was wrong with her? Just kidding. Actually, none of what I'm about to tell is her fault. She's completely exonerated from the story that is about to be heard by you. So anyway, she took the books from the dresser, replaced them with clothes, took the books and put them in a trash bag, and stored the trash bag in our garage. Now, mind you, we were renting the house, so nobody else lived there. It was just us in the house, and it was our garage. Months went by, and the landlady had some work done in the yard. She was, I think she was building a deck or something. She knew that we were going to be moving out eventually, and she wanted to have the house for herself anyway. So she was doing some construction that benefited her. She had a crew in there. They did their thing. And when they were done with the construction, they cleaned up after themselves, as any good construction crew would do. And they threw away all the trash, as any good construction crew would do. However, part of the trash they threw out was the trash bag containing all of my uncopied, mostly handwritten writing that I had laboriously scrawled doing a year in state prison. And when I realized the writing was gone, even though I hadn't touched it in a long time, I had a complete meltdown. I had basically what probably would be diagnosed as a nervous breakdown, because the whole facade had been lifted. And every bit of emotion that I successfully managed to bury by creating that facade came crashing down, and I went through all the pain of the incarceration in one day. Well, at that point, I was never going to write again. I gave up. But things go on and on and on and on, and life did this and life did that, and I got divorced, and I moved to Southern California, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, one day, 20 years later, I had this thing about inspiration. I've never been able to answer this question. Does inspiration come from within? Is it something that's always been in you? Or is it something that comes externally and taps you on the shoulder and gives you an idea? Wherever it comes from, I don't care where it comes from. I care that it exists. And boy, in 2006 and 7, it sure existed, because out of nowhere, I started writing again. And now I started telling stories. And now I was older and perhaps wiser, perhaps dumber. I don't know. I started writing a lot of these stories, which gets to the reason I have this channel. So now here we are. Another 16 years has gone by. It's 2023. All this writing that I did in 2007. However, the difference between the writing I did in 2007 and the writing I did in 1976 is that in 07, I did it in Word Perfect or Word whatever, Microsoft Word. Bottom line is, it's copied. I've emailed it to myself. I've emailed it to other people. It can't be disposed of. It can't be erased. It can be erased, but then there's more copies of it. So these stories exist, and I'm kind of proud of some of them. So there's a line in a Pink Floyd song that I like to play called "Time," and it's we're plans that either come to naught or half a page of scribbled lines. And I started playing that song a couple of years ago, and I realized that's what my writing was. My writing was half a page of scribbled lines. I never did anything with it. I never tried to get a publisher, nothing. And Substack came along. I started thinking maybe I'll put these up on Substack. But I think what I'm going to do instead is every Tuesday night, I'm going to do a live stream, and I'm going to tell one of the stories from my collection. And by the time I'm done, it'll be kind of like I'm inspired by David Sedaris. He wrote a book called Naked. It's a collection of stories that are about the same length as my stories. and they're not exactly related to each other, but they are. They're kind of not, they don't continue, but they relate to each other. So I'll be telling these stories, each one freestanding, but all of them adding up to a larger sum. Okay. So I wanted to lead with that because last week when I did the live stream, I had my story in the back. And this time I'm putting the story in the front and politics in the back. But here come politics. And I'm going to do a share screen to begin with and share. While we're doing stories, I'm going to share a little excerpt from one of my favorite children's stories, one that is likely familiar to all of you. And I will explain the context of it. Let me see if I did this right. Let me look back at StreamYard. Okay, this will do. And I'm going to press play. I'm capable of doing that. Here we go.
Oh, well, added Slick. The Emperor admired himself in the mirror. Don't I look magnificent? People will talk about me for years to come. Yes, Your Majesty, everyone agreed, staring at the Emperor. Open the palace gates, ordered the Emperor, and let the royal procession begin. The crowd gasped when they saw the Emperor. Everyone had heard that only clever people could see his clothes, so everyone cried out, "How splendid His Majesty looks in his new clothes, and look how well they fit." Of course, no one could see the clothes, but none of them would admit that, because no one wanted to declare himself a fool. Until a small child cried out, "The Emperor has no clothes on!" Then everyone looked at each other and began laughing out loud. The Emperor has no clothes on!
Okay.
The Emperor realized he had been fooled
How
by
do I?
Slick and
Oh
Slimus,
yeah, I'm on the
and that he
press pause. Okay. I'm gonna prove myself to be the fool by the end of this video because I'm gonna do something that I also didn't have checked on my bingo card. I'm gonna award the Dipshit of the Day award to somebody I never, ever thought would win it. Somebody I've respected for a very long time, but who has, in my opinion, gone completely off the rails. A lot of people have gone off the rails lately, and probably those people are going to think I'm off the rails for calling them out. But hey, you know what? I got nothing to lose. You guys get tens of thousands of views. I get like 6, maybe 12. So I got nothing to lose. And you know, if everybody leaves, I only lost 12 subscribers or 12 viewers. No big deal. Actually, zero watchers right now. We'll see who ends up watching this later. Okay, so remember that I made the reference to the Emperor's New Clothes. And now I'm going to make another reference because first of all, I've said this in the past. People who are of the opinion that their opinions are facts are absolutely insufferable. So I'm going to share a tweet of someone who believes her opinions are facts, and she pretty much comes out and says it here and there. So I'm going to stop this screen and go back to sharing my screen. I'm getting a little bit better, just a little bit better at this. And I got to find the right thing this time. And here it is. And I'm going to share it. And here's what it says. This is from Caitlin Johnstone. Now, Caitlin Johnstone is an English blogger, journalist. I'm not sure exactly what we call her. She tweets a lot, usually really, really wordy. Sometimes I've seen a couple of YouTube videos that involve her. She's somebody I've, semi followed over the years. Often, usually have liked what she said, often kind of shook my head. This one actually showed up in the Tulsi group. Somebody shared it that I recently departed from, and this was one of the less stupid tweets that got shared that led to me leaving the group. That's a whole separate story. Anyway, Caitlin Johnstone says, and oh, by the way, one thing I have always loved about her is she has an uncanny ability to type in an English accent. Now, I'm not going to read this in an English accent, so I'll blow it. But I actually found her ability to use some of the phraseology she uses rather endearing over the years. Here's what she said last week. You can't both sides everything. You can't live your life that way. Yes, it's possible to see both sides of a very contentious issue. You're supposed to be able to do that. I just want to make sure that I have the right one up here this time. You're supposed to be able to do that. It's a sign of intellectual maturity. If you can't see both sides of an issue, your relationship with abstract concepts is too rigid, and you're probably lacking in empathy. It's just a basic part of growing up to learn how to stand in other people's shoes and see where they're coming from. Okay, Caitlin Johnstone, so far the first sentence was a little bit, but that second paragraph, I can't disagree with a single word of it. It is important to see both sides of the issue. I do my best. Can't always do it, but I do my best. She goes on. But just because you can see both sides doesn't mean you should live your life as though they're both equally true or as though they both have equal merit. If you want to have a truth-based relationship with reality, it's not enough to see both sides. You got to grapple with it and figure out which side is more truthful, which side has more merit. We're neglecting a whole dimensionality of understanding if you just leave it at well, I could see both sides, so I have no responsibility to pick one. She kind of loses me a little bit there, but this next paragraph is kind of the money one, in my opinion. Here we go. There's a type of personality that has a strong attraction to feeling like it's above the fray, like it's detached from the disputes, and from the disputes and dichotomies of the common riffraff, looking down at it all from a lofty place of transcendent understanding. Such people are, without exception, she says. She says without exception once. I said it twice, and here comes thrice. Without exception, insufferable wankers. Okay, Caitlin Johnstone. And she goes on in the rest of that tweet to basically state the Palestinian position and go very heavily anti-Zionist. So that's probably a setup to her paying a little lip service to seeing both sides and then taking a side. Okay, fine. That's her opinion. But insufferable, she is absolutely one of those people who is of the opinion that her opinions are facts. But I'm insufferable also. I quote myself all the time. I guess I'll quote myself now if I can find my tweet, which I believe I should be able to. And here's what I said. Unrelated to that, but I just want to say in terms of not taking sides and in terms of the voice of reason, we live in an age ruled by war machines where it takes courage to speak out as a voice of reason. If the voices of reason continue to be drowned out by the drums of war, the next age will be ruled by cockroaches. So, and again, I am strongly of the opinion, that the only alternative to the voice of reason becoming the dominant voice in a conflict is the utter destruction of one party or the other. And sorry, some of us actually like peace. Some of us actually want to minimize death, et cetera, et cetera. Now, that being said, well, let me get to the rest of it, because she didn't just say insufferable. She said insufferable wanker. And as a Yank from the colonies, that wanker thing, whether it's told with or without the British accent, had me very, very puzzled. Luckily, we live in an age where information is available everywhere. And I believe I have found the answer to the what's a wanker question. And let's find out the answer together.
Let's see what we got here. Wanker. Let's see what else we got. Piss off, wanker. I hope you choke on a Big Mac.
Good thing these are anonymous.
No, Roy signed that
Roy.
one. Oh, here's a good one. Shower pressure is rubbish. Make a note of that. Wanker. Yep. Well, I'm not going to say that word out loud. Wanker.
You don't want to let them call you a wanker, Ted. It's bad.
What's a wanker? I'm a visual learner, so that's very helpful. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Okay, I got one. What if I?
Okay. So hopefully we're all visually competent and we now all understand what a wanker is. As far as the Middle East conflict goes, for years, I've kind of told this joke based on the information I had. And I present this as not as opinion or fact, but just as kind of processing information and spitting it back out, which I think is all any of us really do when we watch the news or any of these independent media shows. We listen, we process, and we repeat the parts that make sense. So based on the information I had for many, many years, I thought that Israel's policies, especially in the West Bank, were rather cruel. And I was a bit outspoken about it. And in retrospect, perhaps more outspoken than I should have been, based on having really no firsthand knowledge of the situation, but trusting my sources. So I had this joke I would tell because I came under criticism from some of my Jewish friends, and I was called anti-Zionist, and I was also called anti-Semitic. And what I started going around saying for the longest time, and it's always got to laugh, was, okay, if you want to call me anti-Zionist, I can live with that. But if you want to call me anti-Semitic, I want my foreskin back. And that was my position for years. But the point being that I was critical of what Israel was doing. I was it didn't seem right. I was saying things like the kid that got bullied has become the bully. Everything changed on October 7th, 2023. Because what happened on that day was a level of cruelty, a level of barbarism. You've heard all the adjectives. There really isn't a word for what happened on that day other than listing the atrocities that went on. And I don't want to do that because I'm going to start crying. There's only 2 times in my life I've cried from the news. One of them was a couple of days after October 7th when I started hearing about these atrocities. And the other was 9/11. But it put everything in a whole new ballgame. And before Israel even retaliated, I started seeing all this pro-Palestinian, anti-Israeli sentiment. I was actually watching the news on the day that it happened with a fairly high-profile podcaster who was a good friend of mine, and maybe down the road will be a good friend of mine again. But this friendship is very much on hold right now. And if he sees this video, it's gonna put another nail in that coffin, because I still haven't awarded my Dipshit of the Day award to somebody who was not on my bingo card to receive one. We'll get to that. But I started seeing independent journalists who I'd followed for years in lockstep. They used to show like montages of MSNBC and The View and CNN, and how the mainstream media would have these talking points that was parroted by all these different so-called reporters, and it was very entertaining. The problem is now, if you go onto these independent media stations, you're going to hear the same thing over and over and over again. They're not going to use the word terrorist. They're not going to say very much, if anything, about October 7th. They're not going to say a word about the rising anti-Semitism happening at these demonstrations. And they're definitely not going to take ownership of the fact that as people who are playing to an angry audience, and the reason I say an angry audience is because most people who turn to independent media to begin with, myself included, are angry because they were being lied to by the mainstream media. And so independent media kind of became like that kid in The Emperor's New Clothes, calling out the mainstream and covering stories that mainstream wouldn't cover, and sharing perspectives that I found to be very refreshing. And for the last 7 years or so, ever since the shenanigans by the DNC in 2016, which I thought weren't being properly covered by MSNBC, to say the least, I've been a huge fan and supporter of various independent media outlets. And I'm not going to go as far as saying I took every word as gospel, although it comes kind of close. Shame on me. Shame on me for trusting somebody's narrative without maybe vetting it closer for myself. And maybe they were telling the truth. Fact of the matter is, I was listening with a very sympathetic ear. They were saying things I wanted to hear. And now they're saying things that I think are absurd. So am I corrupt? Was I giving them kudos because they were agreeing with me? And now because they don't, I'm ready to call one of them a dipshit of the day? I don't know. I have a hard time judging my own hypocrisy barometer, but I'd like to not be a hypocrite. I know I'm insufferable. I don't think I'm a wanker. But I'm glad to know what a wanker is. Thank you, Ted Lasso. And by the way, that's a great show. I highly recommend it. But anyway, that same journalist, Caitlin Johnstone, more recently made another tweet of something that happened on Monday. And this story and this video is all over Twitter. And everybody's having, well, all the people I've come across are having very similar reactions because I'm still coming across the same people I followed all these years for the most part. So let me share my screen again. And I think I'm getting better at this. I'll let you be the judge of that. I have a watcher. Whoever's watching, thank you. You don't have to say anything. I'm just happy somebody's watching. And where is it? Here we go. This is our friend Caitlin Johnstone once again. And this is, she titles this, Tone Policing Opposition to Genocide. U.S. Senator Chris Coons sat across from journalist Aaron Mate. By the way, is it Aaron Mate or Aaron Mate? He's got the accent over the E, but I've heard him call himself Aaron Mate. Anyway, it doesn't matter. That's what happens when you're a blather. You just kind of go off on tangents. U.S. Senator Chris Coons sat across from journalist Aaron Mate on the train on Monday, which is about the worst place you could possibly choose to sit if you're a powerful official in a government that's in the middle of backing an active genocide. As any journalist of sound conscience would, Mate seized the opportunity to begin questioning Coons on camera about his support for Israel's ongoing massacre of civilians in Gaza and ask him why he isn't supporting the ceasefire. So there we go, Caitlin Johnstone, pretty much saying the same thing that all these people in lockstep with each other and independent media have been saying. Coons immediately became indignant that Mate was questioning him. He avoided addressing the questions he was being asked for a long time, responding only to repeatedly demand that Mate cease talking to him and to ask him who he is and how he got a seat on the train. So now we have Caitlin Johnstone, who I obviously disagree with on, and again, it's not that I am a big-time Zionist. I'm not saying kill all the Palestinians, wipe them off the face of the map. I just want long-term peace. So by me attempting to be a voice of reason, putting me in opposition with somebody who demands I take sides, I'm sorry, but that's where we are. But anyway, Caitlin Johnstone not only trends, she goes on and on and on, but her words about how she presents this so-called interview is, well, I have a very different take on this. So I'm going to play it without interruption. If I was Jimmy Dore, I would interrupt this thing about 15 times to comment. But I don't want to do that because I find that to be annoying sometimes. And I have too much respect for the one person who's viewing this, whoever that is, to inject my opinion. I'm just going to let everybody form their own opinions. If you haven't seen this, here we go. And I guess I have to it and
Senator, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but when I call for a ceasefire in Gaza, I'm a journalist. My name's Aaron Mate. When I call for a ceasefire in Gaza, you have 4,600 children killed. 46. I know it's a quiet car, and I apologize for abuse, but I understand. But children are dying. Children are dying, sir. More than 40. When I call for a ceasefire, they're being killed with our weapons. U.S. weapons are killing kids in Gaza.
Who are you?
My name is Aaron Mate. I'm a journalist.
Nice to meet you, Aaron.
Likewise.
Please stop talking to me.
I'm sorry, sir. It's of dire importance. More than 11,000 civilians is we're talking being killed. I'm a journalist for the Gray Zone.
What's the Gray Zone?
It's a U.S. based news website.
Good for you.
Thank you. And right now with our support, kids are being killed. I'm sorry. With our weapons, I'm asking you to explain when I call for a ceasefire.
You're bothering me and everyone else around.
Kids in Gaza are being massacred. I'm asking you to please explain when I call for a ceasefire.
Stop. Sir, could I please have some help here?
Kids are being killed with our
Please stop.
weapons.
I'm asking you to stop.
Why not stop?
This is
Why
not
not
an
call for
appropriate
stop
place
and
for you
no?
to interview me. You're bothering everybody else
It's
around us.
it's a crisis
How
right
did you
now.
get this seat?
I bought the seat.
No. He's bothering me while I'm trying to do work.
and our government is paying for weapons that are murdering children. Guys, I'm asking you, want to call for a ceasefire?
Aaron,
Can you explain that?
please stop.
Can I ask you to explain why I call for a
You've already asked
ceasefire?
me 5 times. I'm not
And
going
why
to
won't
call
you
for
explain?
a ceasefire. I strongly support humanitarian causes. I've urged the Israeli government to target their campaign against Hamas. But you need
Do you think
to
the
stop.
campaign is targeting against Hamas when
Aaron,
civilians are being massacred,
Aaron,
when babies and incubators are dying
Aaron,
because the
please
fuel is
stop,
being cut
or
off?
I'm going to have you thrown off this train. Please stop doing this.
I have to
You've
ask these
asked me
questions.
10 times.
I know, and I
You're
will keep.
getting as professional, measured, appropriate an answer out of me as you can. This is not professional journalism. Please get up and leave.
I don't think it's humane to be massacring kids. That's the problem here.
That's
I
great.
realize I'm not
I don't
being
think it's
professional.
humane to be massacring kids either.
Okay, then
And
why
I
are we
think when
supporting it?
Hamas massacred 1,400 Israeli civilians, the whole world should unite in opposition to terrorism.
First of all, the number is 1,200. It wasn't
Are
entirely
we going to
civilians, but
quibble over
regardless.
how many civilians
Well,
were
it's
massacred by
important.
Hamas?
It's important to be precise. It's important,
It is important to be precise.
but yes, civilians were massacred.
I'm a senator.
Second, that's
This
the right
is a
to kill.
quiet car. You're breaking the basic rules of how we operate on Amtrak.
Okay, and the question
Please
is,
stop.
and I believe we're breaking international law
Okay.
by supporting
Thanks for
massacres
your
of
opinion.
civilians. Yes.
You've had a lot of my time. Please move on.
Why not at least
right.
call for a ceasefire?
Okay, this thing is all over Twitter right now. Hello, Gray Walker joined third party. Yes, joined third party. I love that. And thank you for being my only watcher right now. And you could feel, I'm about to comment on that video, and you could feel free to share your opinion. And it doesn't matter whether or not we agree or disagree, as long as we do so respectfully. Aaron Mate, I want to congratulate him. A lot of people are congratulating Aaron Mate right now for a different reason. And oh, by the way, apparently, according to contemporary legend, Aaron Mate was actually thrown off the train, which makes him a victim. I want to congratulate Aaron because for the first time in the history of the award, an award I've given many times on Twitter to Rob Reiner, to Cenk Uygur, to AOC, and to a couple of others. Hillary Clinton actually finally won one. She worked really hard, but she finally won one. But those were all on Twitter. For the first time in the history of my YouTube channel, the 2-week history of my YouTube channel, I am going to give an award, a Dipshit of the Day award live to you, Aaron Mate. And I don't care. You could, Aaron Mate. Why are you Mate when you have an accent over the E? But anyway, that just I'm part of the punctuation police. Stuff like that annoys me. So anyway, Gray Walker says senators are paid to be annoyed by journalists. Yeah, that's one way of looking at it. The way I'm looking at it is Aaron made a lot of mistakes here. I didn't go to journalism school, but I could just from common sense. First of all, the guy's a 60-year-old sitting U.S. senator. Aaron Mate is 40, maybe 41. I know respect for your elders is an old one, and maybe respect for the office of senator. And I know that our senators and congresspeople, in a lot of cases, are not worthy of our respect. But this was a 60-year-old man trying to get home from work. Aaron Mate invaded his space. I'm sure it wasn't random chance that got him that seat in front of him. And instead of saying to him, which might have gotten him an interview, it's both wrong and strategically wrong of him. If he would have said, instead of just jumping in, I don't want to put you on the spot, but why are you paying for babies to be killed or whatever, however he began it. Instead of doing that, just say, Senator, nice to see you. I'm an independent journalist. I work for the Gray Zone. I'd like to ask you a couple of questions. Do you mind? And he would have said yes or no. But Aaron didn't give him an older man trying to get home from work, being relentlessly badgered by a so-called journalist. Matt Taibbi's a real journalist, not a so-called journalist. Aaron Mate has become a so-called journalist. And this is permeated from the Gray Zone. You know, we want to talk about third party, right? RFK is a darling of third parties. But Max Blumenthal took it upon himself to call out RFK on his stance on Israel. This is way before October 7th. Did it publicly, did it on the Jimmy Dore show, challenged him to a debate. What would RFK Jr. gain from debating Max Blumenthal? I'll tell you what Max Blumenthal would gain. He'd gain the currency that they all care about: clicks, likes, and views, because that's what the gray zone has become. And I'm so, again, it was not on my bingo card to be this critical of the gray zone, to unsubscribe to Jimmy Dore, which I did yesterday, after like faithfully checking out almost every one of his videos for 7 years. The problem I have is Israel, Palestine is a two-sided issue. And for every argument you want to give me in favor of Israel, I can give you a Palestinian argument. And for every Palestinian argument you want to give me, I can give you an Israeli argument. The point being, there are two sides to this story. And when you only report one side of the story, as I said in last week's podcast, in the words of Jimmy Dore when he was talking about Rachel Maddow and her ilk, you're committing journalistic malpractice. Independent media set itself up to be held to a very high standard of being truth tellers and fair reporting, and they are not living up to the standard they set up for themselves. So right now, Aaron Mate, you are the emperor, and I'm the idiot kid who just announced to the world that I think you're naked. Now, there's a lot of people on Twitter right now who are admiring your new clothes and crying over your lost train ticket. Well, let me put an end to that right now. Anybody wants to DM me on Twitter, ung714, with a legitimate address, I will send Aaron Mate I'll send him $50 so he can get himself a new train ticket, or pay for the train ticket that he had to buy when he got kicked off the train. I'm not sure it was great to kick him off the train. He certainly had to be removed from the quiet car. And that's just my opinion. And I'm not stating that as fact. It's just my opinion. So, okay, I'm at the 42-minute mark. That's probably enough blather for one episode. I do want to say one thing. I do intend on Tuesday nights to do a live stream and continue telling the stories that I told at the beginning of this. And yeah, I agree, Gray Walker. It is certainly more cursed than holy in the so-called Holy Land. But I mean, whatever they think is the holiness of it is at the root of all these problems, because no other land dispute has ever been this intense. Boundaries in Europe changed like crazy for centuries. This country, used to be called Turtle Island by the Lakota, and the part of the country I'm living in was part of Mexico. But there was no religion involved. So I guess for whatever reason, people accepted the conquest and everything else that went on. And I'm not saying Israel was a conquest necessarily. We can do entire episodes on what happened in 1948, and I can make a case for both sides. But I have to say that what happened on October 7th was so far outside humanity, so far outside anything I could have imagined, on a par with the Holocaust, except on a smaller scale. The cruelty was beyond what I could even think about. It put it in a different place. And no, I don't want to see children bombed in hospitals. I also don't want to see hospitals used to house human shields and have military bases under them. And I don't know if it's strategically correct for Israel to go out and take out Hamas. I don't even know if Hamas could be taken out. But I don't know. That's the point. I don't know. And none of you fuckers in independent media know either. Sorry about the F word there. That's how upset I am with this. Because, again, think about being a member of a religious order or a cult, and then all of a sudden you wake up one day and say, whoa, maybe this isn't what I thought it was. That's how I feel right now about where I've been for a long time. And like I say, I left the Tulsi Ohana group yesterday because stuff like this was being posted in there. And it had become a Hamas propaganda thread. Not completely, but enough of it that I had two choices: walk away or jump in there and start arguing with people that I don't really want to argue with, because a lot of them have been friends of mine and comrades of mine for a long time. The Tulsi Ohana, the use of the word Ohana, that's the name of the group, Tulsi Ohana. It's because the Tulsi supporters were in Ohana. I've never seen anything like the camaraderie that took place, not just between Tulsi and the audience, but among the audience. It reminded me more than anything of a Grateful Dead show, where people would be there and we all just wanted to love the music and love each other. And after my fourth or fifth Tulsi rally, it became more about the people I was going to see there than about Tulsi. So we had that group, the Tulsi Ohana, and for the longest time we exchanged stories, we exchanged ideas. October 7th changed everything. Everything's upside down now. People are at each other's throats. You know what it reminds me of? If you say, hey, Grey Walker, have you seen Westworld? Did you see the second season of Westworld by any chance? You don't have to answer, but because I'm going to go on anyway. In the second season of Westworld, there's a scene where the people are going to this better place, and the bad guys send this zombie who's programmed to make them all kill each other. So they're all in the common cause. They're all going to their version of the Holy Land. And along comes this zombie. And okay, so maybe you'll know. I'm glad you saw Grey Walk. So maybe you'll know. So along comes this zombie who used to work in the massage parlor, except now she's been zombified and she's programmed to make everybody kill each other. And they all start killing each other. That's what it reminds me of in my circles since October 7th. Again, one of my best friends and I are just not speaking to each other, and it looks pretty hopeless right now. and it's sad. He was actually at my house watching the coverage with me on the day that all this happened. So I don't know where it all goes from here, but I'm not going to go along. I can't. I think Aaron Mate was being. I'll give you a choice. You could say douchebag or dipshit, but since dipshit of the day is what I've been using, and douchebag is probably a bit sexist, so I don't want to go there. Anyway, I've lapsed into blather, so maybe it's time. I'm 47 minutes into a 10-minute video, and hopefully I've held your attention if you're watching this in the aftermath. Thank you very much, Grey Walker. You're in the stay out of it camp. I'm not sure what staying out of it looks like. I certainly don't want to see us put boots on the ground. But the us getting involved is another level of it. Right now, it's more the ceasefire versus take out Hamas conflict. But I'd agree with. I'm certainly on the stay out of it side of stay out of it when it comes to Ukraine. If Israel's very existence becomes threatened, if they get invaded, I can't promise where I'm going to be. I really can't, because I am very, very much non-interventionist. I'm very much pro-peace. Hell, I just did a video, War Machine. Usually my videos, including this one, get maybe a dozen views. War Machine got almost 1,200 views. So War Machine kind of tells where I'm at when it comes to war. I'm very, very anti-war. My attraction to Tulsi was because she was against interventionist wars. So I really hope that decision doesn't ever have to get made. I hope somehow this all gets worked out, that these two parties who hate each other duke it out, and somehow, and I don't know how, long-lasting peace for everybody, Israeli and Palestinian, is achieved. And I am not going to state an opinion on the best path to that, because I don't know. Okay, I'm repeating myself. Grey Walker and whoever else is watching this in the aftermath, thank you so much for listening. I'm looking forward to doing this regularly on Tuesday nights, probably around 6 o'clock California time, 9 o'clock Brooklyn time. And well, at this point, I'm just going to leave you with what I always say at the end. The boomer has blathered. Peace out.